Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the massive, invisible backbone of the global economy, real-time gross settlement systems, or RTGS for short. If you've ever wondered how the world's largest banks move absolute fortunes securely and instantly, well, you're in the right place. Let's unpack how this critical plumbing actually works and why, surprisingly, its greatest superpower is actually its biggest vulnerability.
To really grasp the stakes of what we're talking about, consider this absolutely staggering number: 800 billion pounds. That is a figure so massive it rivals the GDP of entire countries. But here's the kicker. This isn't an annual budget or a decade of spending.
It is the amount of money moving on an average working day in the UK alone. According to the Bank of England, RTGS is literally the beating heart of every single electronic payment. So even if you never interact with it directly, the financial ground you walk on every day is supported by this exact system.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll explore this hidden financial engine, uncover the power of finality, and then look at the speed and finality trap. After that, we'll examine the upstream defense shield that protects it all, and wrap up with why it forms the backbone of stability.
Let's jump into Section 1, the hidden financial engine. We're going to look beyond ordinary retail payments and see what this system actually does behind the scenes.
The Bank for International Settlements defines RTGS as an infrastructure where interbank transfers are settled individually, continuously, and with finality. Think of it kind of like a VIP fast pass lane just for banks. Instead of batching a bunch of transactions together and settling the net difference at the end of the day, like splitting a giant bar tab, RTGS processes every single massive transfer entirely on its own, the exact second it happens.
So, to be clear, we are not talking about everyday retail channels here. When you buy a coffee or pay your buddy back for dinner, you aren't using RTGS. This is the heavy-duty plumbing for wholesale banking, massive securities trades, and huge international bank-to-bank relationships.
Moving right along to Section 2, the power of finality. This is where this system's greatest feature changes the rules of the game entirely.
The contrast here is pretty stark. I mean, if you make a mistake on your mobile banking app or a fraud alert gets triggered, your bank can usually delay or reverse the payment, right? Well, RTGS is an entirely different beast. Once an RTGS payment settles, it is done, instant and final. No takebacks, no pending statuses, and absolutely zero grace periods.
So why is it so absolute? Simply because it uses central bank money. In the financial world, that is the absolute safest asset on earth. It completely eliminates settlement risk, meaning the receiving bank knows for a fact that the money is 100% guaranteed.
Which brings us to Section 3, the speed and finality trap. Here, we discover that this exact superpower acts as its own kryptonite when we're talking about fighting financial crime.
We call this the ultimate control challenge. Real-time speed combined with absolute finality leaves zero room for retrospective correction. Basically, there is no customer service hotline to call for a refund once a transaction clears. The system executes perfectly, sure, but if the payment itself was illegal, well, that perfection instantly becomes a massive liability.
Just look at what happens when things go wrong. If a fraudulent payment slips through, it settles instantly, resulting in a permanent loss. Violate international sanctions? Boom! Instant violation, no reversal. Even simple, operational typos become finalized nightmares. Post-settlement recovery is practically non-existent. The damage is done instantly and permanently.
So, the core realization here? RTGS systems do not actually replace your anti-money laundering or fraud controls, they just make those controls incredibly consequential. You see, the RTGS layer is essentially blind, it just executes whatever the upstream channels approve. So a weak upstream check basically guarantees a finalized bad payment.
Okay, so how do we fix this? That brings us to Section 4, the upstream defense shield. How exactly do you protect an infrastructure that just cannot be corrected after the fact?
Well, it all comes down to sequence. First, you have payment initiation. Then, and this is crucial, the upstream controls. This is where your AML, sanctions, and fraud checks live. Only after running that absolute gauntlet does it reach final execution. All that heavy lifting of compliance has to form an airtight shield before the payment ever even touches the RTGS layer.
Participating firms absolutely must get this right. Comprehensive screening, instant sanctions checks, and robust fraud detection, they aren't optional, they are mandatory. Because the very moment they hand that payment off to the central bank's RTGS system, they basically stepped off the cliff and the safety net is completely gone.
That perfectly highlights this really interesting paradox. RTGS systems are highly relevant to financial crime controls, even though they are not AML systems in themselves. The engine doing the settling isn't screening for crime, and that makes the integrity of those upstream checks literally the only thing preventing a mistake from becoming permanent.
Finally, let's zoom out a bit for Section 5, the backbone of stability. Let's look at why protecting this system is undeniably vital for global stability. Now, this isn't just a UK concept. From the Bank of England to the European Central Bank's Target and T2 systems, this infrastructure spans the globe. And as ordinary retail payments get faster and start operating 24/7, these massive RTGS systems are being forced to adapt their hours to manage settlement risk around the clock. They are what maintains confidence across entire continents.
Because money laundering and sanctions evasion try to sneak through this very infrastructure, protecting this final layer is absolutely non-negotiable. It requires true operational resilience, flawless data quality, and super strict access controls. Because if an RTGS system is compromised, it doesn't just hurt one bank, it introduces massive systemic risk to the entire financial ecosystem that you and I rely on every single day.
So, I'll leave you with this crucial thought to chew on regarding the systems that move the world's money. Given that there is absolutely no post-settlement recovery, are your upstream controls flawless enough for the absolute finality of RTGS? When settlement is instant and final, your defenses have to be perfect before that button is pushed. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the invisible infrastructure that shapes our world.